I've got some troubling news about England's royal family.
When a royal tension turns into a shocking revelation, Princess Anne's husband finds himself uncovering a truth about Queen Camilla that no one ever expected. It began quietly at first.
Freely, please let us not become too politically correct.
Like most royal matters that never make the papers,
she becomes my queen consort. I know she will bring to the demands of her new role the steadfast devotion.
But those who were close enough to notice said there was something strange about the air at Balmoral that week. King Charles had just returned from a short stay at Birkhall, his private retreat.
I think he'll change. He is committed to his own level of service, and that will remain.
Where he had been advised to rest, following another round of medical checkups. He appeared calm in public, but those close to him could see the tension behind the formal smiles. Princess Anne's husband, Vice Admiral Sir Timothy Laurence, had seen it before. Years of service in the Royal Navy had trained him to read small details, the little things that others missed. And lately, he had begun to notice these changes in Charles's schedule, a new group of advisors, and Camilla's growing influence over even the most private decisions concerning the king's health. It wasn't unusual for Camilla to be involved. After all, she had stood by Charles for decades, but there was something different this time. Doctors' visits were no longer discussed openly among the family. Certain medical letters that Anne would normally be copied into as the king's closest sibling suddenly stopped arriving. Even private aides who had worked with Charles for years were being replaced by names that only Camilla seemed to know. At first, Anne brushed it off as part of the king's adjustment to a slower lifestyle. "He's tired, that's all," she had told Tim one evening over dinner at Gatcombe Park. Camilla means well. She thinks keeping him busy will help, but Tim had shaken his head. "It's not that, Annie. I've seen people lose control of their own lives before, little by little, without even realizing it." He wasn't suggesting anything dramatic, at least not yet. But when an old friend from the royal household called him, the tone of her voice made him uneasy. "Sir Timothy," she said softly, "I don't know if I should even be saying this, but some of us are worried. His Majesty doesn't seem to have much say these days. Everything goes through the Queen." That was the moment Tim decided to pay closer attention. Over the next few weeks, his observations grew more troubling. Camilla was always present, not just at official engagements, but in every private setting. She sat in on phone calls, gave instructions to Charles' staff, and even began responding to letters meant for the king. Her confidence had always been part of her charm, but this seemed more like control. When Anne noticed her brother becoming more withdrawn, she called Tim to discuss it. "He's not himself," she said. "Even his tone on the phone sounds off." Tim listened carefully. "Do you think something's wrong with him, or is it the people around him?" he asked. Anne paused before answering. "I think it's both." The turning point came during a family lunch at Clarence's house. Tim had accompanied Anne at her request, partly to help her keep the peace. Halfway through the meal, Charles excused himself after barely touching his food. Camilla smiled politely and explained that he'd had a long morning, but the look on her face wasn't one of concern. It was one of calculation. Later that afternoon, as guests were leaving, Tim noticed a folder on a side table with the king's initials embossed on it. When he glanced at the contents, he saw medical notes with a different doctor's name from the one Charles had always trusted. The papers mentioned a series of private consultations scheduled outside the regular royal medical channels. The signature at the bottom was not Charles's. That discovery changed everything. Tim didn't confront Camilla immediately. He knew better than to accuse someone without proof. Instead, he made a copy of the document and took it to Anne. When she saw it, her expression hardened. "This isn't right," she said. "Charles would never authorize this on his own." From that day, Anne and Tim began began keeping track of small but suspicious details. They noticed that Charles's old friends, men he had trusted for years, had stopped visiting. Longtime aides had been reassigned or quietly retired. Even the household staff seemed more nervous than usual whenever the Queen was around. Tim's instincts told him something was being hidden. But what and why? He tried to raise the issue during a private walk with Camilla at Highgrove, framing it as concern for the King's well-being. Her response sent a chill through him. "You worry too much, Sir Timothy," she said with a polite smile. "His Majesty's health is not your responsibility. Leave it to those who truly understand him." That was when Tim realized she was warning him. He didn't say anything, but he knew that he saw fear mixed with defiance in her eyes. Something was being protected, and it was bigger than just Charles's medical notes. That night, as Anne sat reading in their sitting room, Tim quietly placed the copied folder on the table between them. "Whatever this is," he said, "we need to find out before it's too late." What they discovered in the days that followed would shake the family's trust to its very core and reveal a secret Camilla had worked years to keep hidden. Sir Timothy had always been a patient man, trained to think before acting, but the deeper he looked into the matter, the more uneasy he became. The medical file he found at Clarence House didn't add up. The dates didn't match the King's official appointments, and the supposed physician listed wasn't part of the royal medical household. It looked as though someone had access to every detail of Charles's schedule and had been arranging private assessments without anyone else's knowledge. Anne, ever practical, wanted to be cautious. "Let's not jump to conclusions," she told him. "We need to be sure before we make any accusations." But she was clearly unsettled. Her relationship with her brother had always been one of blunt honesty. She had supported him through the darkest moments of his divorce and through the storm that followed his marriage to Camilla. The idea that Charles could now be isolated, even manipulated, was deeply troubling. Tim started to cross-check the doctor's name. What he found was stranger still. The physician, Dr. Quentin Morland, had no clear record of ever being attached to royal service. He was a private consultant with links to a health foundation that Camilla had supported for years. The foundation itself had raised eyebrows among insiders for its vague activities and sudden influx of donations from foreign sources. The timing felt suspicious. Around the same period, Charles had reduced his public duties, citing his health. Camilla had become the more visible face of the crown, representing the monarchy at several events where the king would normally have appeared. The public thought it was a temporary arrangement, but those inside the circle knew better. Camilla was stepping forward not out of duty, but to fill a vacuum she was creating. One evening at Sandringham, Tim brought up the topic again as he and Anne walked the estate grounds. "Anne, this isn't about his health anymore," he said firmly. "Someone's controlling the narrative." The palace press office only releases what Camilla approves. It's as if she's running everything, Anne frowned, pulling her scarf tighter. "If that's true, we can't handle this alone. William needs to know." But telling William wasn't simple. The Prince of Wales was already under pressure, balancing his father's reduced schedule with his own responsibilities. Any sign of division would be seized upon by the media. "We'll gather more evidence first," Tim suggested. "If we go to him, it has to be with facts, not suspicions." Over the next few days, Tim began to notice new details that confirmed his worries. Camilla had replaced several senior members of the household, bringing in people with connections to her own circle. Former staff from Clarence House, and even a few personal acquaintances from her charity work. The king's private secretary, a man who had served Charles loyally for over a decade, suddenly took early retirement. Anne confronted one of the aides she trusted, a middle-aged woman who had worked for their mother, the late Queen Elizabeth. The aide hesitated before speaking. "Your Royal Highness, things have changed. The Queen keeps His Majesty's schedule close now. Most of us don't see him unless she's present. It's uncomfortable." That word lingered with Anne. Uncomfortable. The situation was beginning to look like more than overprotectiveness. Tim suspected Camilla was hiding something about Charles's condition, something that could change how the public saw both of them. When he finally got his hands on another copy of the King's private health records smuggled out by a sympathetic aide, he understood why. The documents suggested that Charles's medical team had been pressured to alter their reports before submission to the Privy Council. The changes were small but significant, as they omitted certain side effects from his treatment and minimized symptoms that pointed to exhaustion and cognitive stress. When Tim shared this with Anne, she sat in silence for a long moment. "You're saying she's keeping him unwell?" "Not exactly," he replied, "but she's certainly keeping the truth from everyone else. Maybe even from him." They knew they couldn't take the information to the press. The fallout would be catastrophic. Instead, Anne decided to reach out to an old friend of the family, Lord Robert Fellows, a retired courtier who had served under Queen Elizabeth II. Discreet and fiercely loyal, he agreed to help them verify the authenticity of the documents. After reviewing them, his verdict was grim. "If these are genuine," he said, "then someone is tampering with official medical communications. That's not only unethical, it's illegal." Tim felt the weight of the situation pressing on him. He wasn't just dealing with palace gossip anymore. He was staring at a coordinated cover-up, and the person orchestrating it was sitting at the heart of the monarchy. The next morning, during the breakfast at Clarence House, he noticed Camilla watching him across the room. Her expression was unreadable, but her words were clear. "Sir Timothy, I hear you've taken quite an interest in His Majesty's affairs lately." "Be careful. Curiosity can be dangerous, even for family." Her tone was polite, but the message behind it was unmistakable. That evening, as Anne and Tim returned to Gatcombe Park, he could no longer keep his thoughts to himself. "She knows we're looking into her," he said, "and she's not afraid to make that clear." Anne's reply was firm. "Then we'll keep going. Because whatever she's hiding, we're not stopping until we find out." Neither of them realized that someone close to Camilla had already started following their movements, and what came next would prove just how far she was willing to go to protect her secret. The days that followed were tense. At Gatcombe Park, Anne tried to maintain her usual routine. Horses in the morning, paperwork in the afternoon. But even her staff could tell something was different. Sir Timothy was spending long hours in his study, speaking on the phone or looking over documents that he locked away after each use. Tim's main concern was that Camilla's control was tightening. Every decision related to the king now passed through her private secretary, a man named Richard Winthrop, who had previously managed her charities. Under his supervision, access to Charles had become even more restricted. Visitors needed written approval, and every conversation was logged. Anne found it infuriating. "This isn't how our family operates," she told Tim. "We were raised to face problems directly, not to hide behind staff." Tim nodded. "That's exactly what worries me. Someone is trying to reshape the whole system around her." To dig deeper, Tim reached out to a trusted contact still working within the palace's security network, an old Navy acquaintance who had taken a position in royal protection. What he learned confirmed his worst fears. "It's subtle," his friend said, "but there's definitely been a shift. Orders are being rerouted through the Queen's office. Even security briefings for His Majesty are filtered before reaching him." Tim felt a chill. But the real revelation came from a different source. During a private visit to Windsor, Tim ran into a former equerry who had retired shortly after Charles's coronation. The man seemed nervous, constantly glancing over his shoulder as they spoke. "Sir Timothy, there's something I think you should know," he whispered. "Before I left, I was told to destroy several files from Clarence's house. They were personal documents, letters, and old reports, but one of them mentioned a fund in Camilla's name. Something to do with a trust in the Channel Islands." Tim raised an eyebrow. "A trust? For what purpose?" "That's just it," the equerry replied. "It didn't list one. But the funds came from several overseas donors, some connected to a private health company. The same name appeared in those medical files you mentioned." The pieces were starting to fit together. Camilla's foundation, her influence over Charles's doctors, and now a secret trust connected to foreign interests were all part of a pattern. But Tim still needed proof that tied everything directly to her. Anne listened carefully as he laid out his findings. "If this is true," she said, "then her motive isn't just control. It's self-preservation. She's protecting something that could destroy her if it came out." That night, Anne drafted a discreet letter to Prince William. She didn't want to alarm him, only to share her concern in measured terms. "There are matters surrounding your father's health and the Queen's management that deserve attention," she wrote. "Tim and I believe it's in the family's best interest to review them privately." William replied 2 days later, asking to meet in person. The meeting took place at Kensington Palace late in the evening. He greeted them warmly but with visible concern. "I've had my suspicions," he admitted, "but if what you're saying is true, it's worse than I imagined." Tim showed him copies of the altered medical reports and summaries of the financial records. William's expression hardened. "My father trusts her completely. If she's keeping things from him, it means she's also keeping things from the entire institution." He leaned forward, lowering his voice. "We need to confirm the origin of that trust. If it's linked to a company involved in his treatment, it could be a conflict of interest or worse." With William's help, Tim gained access to a discreet legal contact who specialized in tracing hidden financial trails. Within a week, the results came back. The trust had been set up over a decade earlier, originally to fund Camilla's personal projects. But in recent years, it had been used to channel payments from private healthcare firms. Some of those same firms had recently secured quiet contracts to provide consulting for royal medical staff. The discovery stunned even Anne. So she's been mixing personal and royal interests. That's not only unethical, it's dangerous. Tim knew they couldn't go public. Exposing it outright would damage the monarchy irreparably, but they had to act. "We'll confront her directly," he said. "If we handle this within the family, we can stop it before it becomes a scandal." The following week, during a small gathering at Highgrove, Tim found the opportunity. As the evening drew to a close, he approached Camilla privately. "There's something you need to be honest about," he said, his voice calm but firm. "The trust, the doctors, the reports. It all points back to you. Why?" Camilla stared at him for a long moment before replying. "You think you understand, but you don't. Everything I've done is to protect the king. If the truth came out about his condition, the crown would never survive the pressure." Her words caught him off guard. "So it's about him, not you?" Camilla's gaze didn't waver. "Believe what you want, Sir Timothy. But remember this: some secrets are buried for a reason." Her calmness unnerved him. She wasn't denying anything, yet she wasn't admitting guilt either. As he walked away, Tim couldn't shake the feeling that she was hiding more than just financial impropriety. He sensed that the real secret was something far deeper and far more personal. The days that followed were tense. The smallest gestures carried heavy meaning, and the press, without knowing the full truth, could sense that something was wrong. Behind palace doors, private discussions were becoming more heated. What started as a quiet exchange between two royal households was now threatening to become a full-blown internal crisis. Tim Laurence had never seen Anne this unsettled. Usually calm, composed, and rational, she now found herself pacing around her sitting room at Gatcombe Park, reading over letters and emails that she refused to show him. When he pressed her, she only said, "It's not something I can ignore, Tim. If this gets out, it could ruin everything." He began to understand that the secret Camilla carried was not just personal but political. It reached deep into the monarchy's public image and the family's internal balance. The issue, as far as he could piece together, involved decisions made during the early years of Charles and Camilla's marriage, including arrangements regarding certain charities that had raised eyebrows within royal circles. Camilla, aware of the whispers, decided to confront Anne directly. It happened at Clarence House one late afternoon. The two women were seated opposite each other, the tension thick in the air. Camilla began first, her tone defensive but tired. "Anne, I've heard what people are saying." "That's not true, and you know it." Anne looked her in the eye. "I don't deal in gossip, Camilla. I deal in facts. And what I've seen raises serious questions. There are donations missing, unaccounted for. And yet the Foundation's records show everything in order. Either someone made a mistake, or someone covered it up." Camilla's expression hardened. "Be careful with your words. You're implying something you can't prove." Anne replied firmly, "Then help me understand it. Because I can't protect the family if there are things being hidden." For a moment, neither spoke. Camilla finally sighed, leaned back, and said, "You wouldn't understand. You always thought I wasn't right for this family, but you have no idea what it took to keep things steady after Diana." None. That sentence landed with force. Anne knew Camilla wasn't wrong about that part, but what Camilla didn't know was that Anne had recently been shown evidence by a former royal aide suggesting that several private meetings between Camilla and powerful donors had taken place, with financial benefits that weren't properly documented. Meanwhile, Charles began to notice the growing distance between his wife and his sister. At a private family lunch, he tried to lighten the mood, but Anne's short answers and Camilla's forced politeness made it clear there was no fixing it easily. Even the younger royals were beginning to sense it. Prince William, who had always admired his aunt's integrity, quietly asked her if she was all right. Her response was simple: "Some things need to come out, even if it hurts." But the situation was about to spiral further. Someone from within the palace leaked information to a senior journalist known for royal coverage, suggesting that a senior royal had questioned the financial integrity of a royal spouse. Though no names were mentioned, speculation ran wild. Social media buzzed with theories, and within hours, all eyes were on Clarence House. Camilla was furious. She called Anne directly that night, her voice shaking. "Was this you? Did you tell them?" Anne was stunned. "Of course not. I would never go to the press." "Then who did?" Camilla demanded. "Because now the whole world is guessing, and Charles is livid. If this blows up, it won't be me who looks bad. It'll be the family." The words hung between them, full of warning and resentment. Anne didn't reply right away. She felt trapped between her sense of duty and her loyalty to the family. The line between truth and destruction was thinner than ever. That night, Tim found her sitting by the window, a letter from her aide on her lap. She whispered, "I thought exposing it would make things right. But maybe there's no right way anymore." What she did next, however, would change everything and would leave everyone in the royal household completely shocked. The morning after, the palace was in chaos. Every major paper had run the same headline: "Royal Rift Deepens." Though no one was named, insiders whispered that Princess Anne and Queen Camilla were at odds. For the first time in years, Anne avoided all public events. Tim could tell she was torn, caught between her loyalty to her brother and her conscience. At Clarence House, Camilla was furious but shaken. She refused to speak to the press and cancelled 2 engagements, claiming illness. Charles, meanwhile, was trying to contain the fallout. He called Anne personally, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "This can't go on, Anne. We've weathered too much to let this destroy the family." Anne's answer was quiet, but firm. "Then tell me the truth, Charles. Was she behind it?" There was a long pause. Charles didn't deny it. Instead, he said, "Things were done to protect the crown. Mistakes were made, but she isn't the enemy." That night, Anne sat with Tim by the fire at Gatcombe Park. "I never wanted it to go this far," she said. "But if the public ever finds out everything, the damage will be far worse." Tim studied her carefully. "So, what will you do?" Anne took a deep breath. "I'll protect the institution, not the lies." The next day, she arranged a private meeting with Camilla at Highgrove. No aides, no notes, just the 2 of them. The tension was thick, but this time Camilla didn't look angry. She looked tired. Anne began, "I don't hate you, Camilla. I just need to know that what's been done won't happen again. The family can't survive another scandal." Camilla nodded slowly. "You think I don't know that? Everything I did was to keep us from falling apart. I made decisions I thought were necessary." Anne looked at her for a long moment. Necessary or not, they crossed lines. People were hurt, and now we're paying for it. Camilla didn't respond right away. Then she reached into her bag and handed Anne a thin envelope. Inside were letters, personal ones, between Camilla and senior aides from years earlier. They detailed arrangements made to divert certain donations meant for public causes into private trust funds for safeguarding royal operations. It wasn't criminal, but it was morally questionable. "I can't undo it," Camilla said quietly, "but I'll make it right. The truth can stay between us. Let me fix it my way." Anne nodded, though her expression didn't soften. "You have one chance. After that, even family won't shield you." When Anne returned home, Tim asked if she felt relieved. She shook her head. "No, just aware. We always think the truth will set things right, but sometimes it just sits there, reminding us what's broken." In the weeks that followed, the press moved on. Camilla resumed her duties, smiling at engagements as if nothing had happened. Charles appeared beside her more often, and the family projected unity once more. Only Anne and Tim knew the real story and the fragile peace holding it all together. Still, something in Anne had changed. She had seen how close the monarchy had come to unraveling, not because of outsiders, but because of what people were willing to hide for the sake of image. One evening, as Tim joined her on the porch, she said softly, "The crown will endure, but not because of secrets." "It endures when someone is brave enough to face them." Tim didn't reply. He just watched as Anne stared into the fading sunset, her expression calm but distant. She had done what she could, and for now, that was enough. But deep down, both of them knew the truth was never buried for long. It was only waiting for the next time it decided to surface. What do you think of Princess Anne's bold decision to confront the truth? Was she right to protect the crown that way, or should she have exposed everything once and for all? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the following video shown on your screen. You will enjoy it.